Hello, Manisha. You can come forward and start.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Very welcome to the 10th webinar in the series of webinar that were announced on 22nd May last year, jointly by the National Biodiversity Authority and United Nations Development Program, basically to spread awareness on India's Biological Diversity Act and its various components. And access and benefit sharing is one of the key components of the Biological Diversity Act. And today we have two eminent personalities who are going to share their thoughts and experiences and learnings in the area of access and benefit sharing. So I would like to first introduce Dr. V.B. Mathur, who is the chairperson, National Biodiversity Authority. Dr. Mathur is the chairperson, NBA, since September 2019. And prior to this, he served as the director of Wildlife Institute of India between 2014 and 2019. Dr. Mathur has been spearheading India's initiatives towards mainstreaming biodiversity in key economic sectors of governance. He is currently serving as a member of UN CBD and UN IPBES bureaus to promote research policy interface. We are very pleased to invite our speaker of the day, Madam Amarjeet Ahuja, who has been the former Joint Secretary of Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Madam Ahuja is a retired IAS officer who served as the Joint Secretary in the ministry in the mid to late 90s and steered the process of formation of National Biodiversity Bill. During this period, she also led Indian negotiating team in the CBD and other related international, multilateral and regional fora, securing the interest of India and other developing countries in collaboration with members of G77 and China, often providing leadership in these groups. Subsequently, Madam pursued integration of biodiversity concerns in the working of Panchayati Raj institutions of local governance at grassroots level under the Ministry of Rural Development. She has served as member and chairperson of several committees under the National Biodiversity Authority and the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. She was instrumental also in drafting India's sixth national report to the CBD, which was submitted to the CBD Secretariat in 2018. Currently, Madam is a senior fellow at the Arabi Foundation for Environmental Education in Delhi. She is also one of the board members of the Hunger Project in India. And she also works as freelance for educational and educational and environmental issues. We would like to now invite Dr. V.B. Mathur to give his opening and welcome remarks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Manisha. On behalf of the National Biodiversity Authority and my own behalf, it's my pleasure and a privilege to welcome you all. I would recall that our journey started 10 months ago. Many of you were present at that time on the 22nd May 2020, when our Honorable Minister, Mr. Prakash Javadekar, launched this webinar series. And as has been pointed out, the Act has been since 2003, but we still feel that adequate understanding of the various provisions and nuances of the law in a larger public and stakeholders is not there. So we started this webinar series, and I'm very pleased to say that this is the 10th one. Each month we have had one, and one of our experts has been able to talk to people. We have had some very interesting Q&A sessions, and I hope that today's webinar also, when we have none other than Madam Ahuja to talk to us. See, one more thing is important. When we were planning the series, the webinar series, we had to plan a sequence. And in fact, she was at number one when we planned the series. But as things happened, then COVID came and she had to go to United States and she got stuck there. But I was very insistent and persistent that we must get her. And I'm so pleased to say that she's here today because she represents the institutional memory of the Act. Very often we tend to forget that. And therefore, in my discourse as a follow-up to this webinar today, we have been discussing that why and how the coming into being of the BD Act because she was among the initial few who were responsible for bringing this act together. And many things have happened, many things have changed, some for the good, some for the worse. But today we have, in the next 30 minutes, she is going to narrate to us the story, what actually happened in the early years of this particular law. And so, ma'am, with these words, I thank you once again, and I invite you to make your presentation. And then I'll request all of you, to those who have questions, may please write them in the chat box, and our team will take it up, and we will try towards the end to answer them. If we are not able to answer, and if we run out of time, then we will have your emails. So if you really need an answer, please put your email ID as well. So over to you, Madam Ahuja, for your excellent and wonderful discourse and education to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mathur. And thank you, Manisha, for your very kind introduction. As a preface to my talk today, I want to say that I'm acutely aware of the fact that my audience comprises experts, people who are either implementing the act or are facing the brunt of the act, so to say, and that a lot of things they would already know what I probably am going to say. But then, since Dr. Mathur has given me the responsibility of sharing the institutional memory, and also to look at what challenges we face today, I think I have to revisit some of the history which the audience may already be aware of. So I request them to bear with me in that. Now, the BD Act came into existence in 2002. BD rules came into existence in 2004. Nearly 16 to 18 years down the road, today, if there's any element of BD Act, which is under a very hot debate and sometimes even question whether it should be there at all, is the provision of access and benefit sharing. Now, the stakeholders for this range from conservers sitting in the far off areas of India to industry, to experts, to researchers, and it is as complex as the number of stakeholders that I've just mentioned. Let's get to the presentation. So today it has very strong proponents, but equally strong opponents from some of these sections. So in order to understand why the provision of ABS had to be included in the, or was included in the convention and subsequent legislations and how it came about, let us look at the legislative instruments for ABS and slightly go back to the development of the Convention on Biological Diversity. The Convention on Biological Diversity came into force in 1992. 1993, India ratified in 1994 and became a party to it. Biological Diversity Act 2000 came into being in 2002. Now, these dates are important. The inclusion of ABS in the convention was rooted in the ascendancy of biological resource and associated technical knowledge-based inventions, research, and products that were coming into the market in early 90s and showed a big promise. Faced with the responsibility of conserving biodiversity, and one must remember that rich biological diversity largely resides in developing countries. There are some developed countries also, but then largely developing countries were faced with the responsibility of conservation, which was necessary for sustainable development, founded on the principles of current equity and intergenerational equity. Now, having agreed to this responsibility, or having come to an agreement that conservation was necessary, the countries providing or conserving resources and creators of traditional knowledge who would be contributing to the development of products. That was one area of debate and concern. And developing countries rich in biodiversity naturally looked at the opportunity or the dividends that conservation offered and would help in generating resources for conservation on the one hand and create constituency for conservation. These were the considerations which the developing countries had, and naturally in the global negotiations, this therefore became one of the important agenda, and therefore the treaty included the provision of access and benefit sharing, where it was visualized that countries would formulate legislative, administrative, or other instruments in order to see that access to biological resources and traditional knowledge is granted by providers on terms and conditions which secure benefits for the providers, but without hindering the onward process of research and development. So the terminology, used is that countries will facilitate access to biological resources on certain terms and conditions. So once the country became a party to this treaty, it was faced with the challenge of putting its instrument into place for taking advantage of this position, because India is one of the mega diverse countries in the world. And while looking at this provision, the task was quite difficult because the range of biological resources covered from minuscule items of minuscule microorganisms to big trees and big animals, which did not lend themselves to any concept of measurement in weight or volume. The spread all over the country and the placement of creators and conservators spread all over the country created other challenge. So it was quite a complex issue to deal with as to how to bring resources of nature, such diverse nature, and with such diverse stakeholders into some kind of a regime, particularly when a lot of them were already in use in the society for various purposes. Trade and commerce was taking place. So the challenge included not only how to cover them, but how to also protect the ongoing systems and business and not disrupt the legitimate uses by the local people and legitimate trade and commerce which took place in the society. So therefore, a lot of thought went into this. A lot of these considerations went into the debate at that time, and it was quite a complex call to see how to create systems for access which secure, which facilitate access, but also secure benefits. After Biological Diversity Act, biological diversity rules were brought into being in 2004 to, no, before this, I also want to highlight the point in order for people to understand is that it's not as if suddenly we all got up and we thought that, okay, now this is the ideal situation and this is how the act would be formulated and it would work. Several rounds of discussions were held with all stakeholders. Several meetings were held all over India, and it took a process of nearly 8 years to actually evolve this act after consultations at various levels, various groups, various peoples. A parliamentary standing committee toward the entire country captured the response and reaction of all stakeholders, and only after that this act came into being. Once the act came into being, the problem that the countries faced was that of extraterritorial nature of the research and product development. And logically, then the convention parties created another instrument for implementation of the provisions of the Act, which was Nagoya Protocol on access and benefit sharing, which came into force in 2010. And India ratified it in 2012. No, this act, this protocol ratified it, and so many other required countries ratified it. And as a follow-up of the act, India created these guidelines on access to biological resources and associated knowledge and benefit sharing regulations in 2014. So therefore, we have in effect 3 instruments which coalesce together for ABS and formulated in pursuance of in the implementation of Convention on Biological Diversity Convention, the Biological Diversity Rules, and the Guidelines on Access 2014. Now, what does this act do? This is something which has become a question of debate. At the time of initial discussions, there were variant putting everything under a regulatory regime for everybody. Then liberal view that, okay, let us have something, but then it should not hinder anything. after detailed discussions with various groups, it was decided that some benign formulation is needed, which regulates access in a manner that when resources or knowledge go outside India, there is some accountability, and of the nature that the Indian laws are followed and benefit is secured. And for Indian users, there should be a system which is in continuation of what is happening without creating any difficulties. So therefore, the formulation that the Act has requires permission from NBA by foreign citizen, non-resident Indian, a body corporate in India for research and commercial utilization. And Indian citizens and entities are required to inform state biodiversity boards while accessing biological resources for research and commercial utilization. Whereas foreign citizens, non-resident Indians, and entities with any foreign participation in management are required to take prior permission from NBA before accessing biological resources and TK. But all persons seeking IPRs or transfer of results of research to any non-Indian entity or to third party require prior approval from NBA. The other two elements of the Act, which are important from the point of view of the implementation of ABS provisions, relate to prior informed consent and mutually agreed terms. Now, the Convention and the Nagoya Protocol both mandate that the access would be facilitated on prior informed consent, and as the phrase itself implies, it means that the prior informed consent of the providers of resources is taken before the resources are accessed. But how, with what? On mutually agreed terms. And what are these mutually agreed terms? Again, as the phrase itself suggests, the terms on which access is granted, which include the terms of benefit sharing. Now, these 2 points I'm highlighting here for underscoring the point how the Biodiversity Act and then subsequent rules incorporate these 2 elements with an eye on facilitating access while implementing these, rather than making them so cumbersome that for each and every case, every access seeker has to go to the community or the person wherever it resides and then negotiate there. The simplified system, which was visualized in the provisions of the Act and rules, is that NBA through SBB and BMC, local body, gathers the prior informed consent, which then facilitates the process of access for the access seeker. So this is a very important element of making the access easy to get while securing the benefits and the rights of the providers. This is an element of the Act which has to be kept in mind when we look at the provisions of the Act. Now, one of the points which has raised has been raised from time to time is whether the benefits as visualized at the time of in early 90s have accrued or not, or whether it has that potential or not, or whether the experience of time has actually created those kinds of benefits, and whether it is now appropriate or legitimate to continue with these kinds of expectations and provisions. I would like to say here that right from the beginning, while I think the case of monetary benefits was probably over-aspired, looking at the of the way biotechnology was coming up at that time. Probably it was over pitched benefits to the provider countries, only in other benefits which would be flowing to developing countries, particularly countries which lack systems, which lack technologies, which lack research systems, research institutions. So an illustrative list of non-monetary benefits, which are also included in the guidelines of 2014, is here, like institutional capacity building, including training, transfer of technology or sharing of R&D results, excuse me, contribution and collaboration in education and training, location of production of products, research and development units, sharing of scientific information, and with reference to India, conducting research directed towards priority needs in India, scholarships, bursaries, and very important, setting up of venture capital funds, etc. So these kinds of benefits were visualized right at the beginning, and if I think there is a study by the Convention on Biological Diversity, which was conducted sometimes in early years of this century, and the study is probably dated 2006, benefits which have flowed to various countries through these provisions. I think there is a case for looking at this in Indian context also, and see whether we have realized full advantage of these kinds of provisions. Now, as I mentioned, that the situation faced by the people trying to work out a system was quite complex, and I've already pointed out the kind of issues that were faced as a result of all those analyses, to accommodate those considerations, and also to see that regular normal course of life is not unnecessarily interrupted. Exemptions were created in the Act from the purview of ABS so that these practices go on. These are traditional agricultural practices, publication of research papers, access to or transfer of biological resources under any law relating to Protection of Plant Varieties Act, local communities, cultivators of biodiversities, vaidyas, hakims who have been practicing for ages, biological resources normally traded as commodities. A number of resources have been notified under this. value-added products, for example, a value-added product in the market is exempt from this, and human genetic materials. So this was to respond to the anxiety to not to disrupt the normal life as it was taking place. Now, this was my bird's eye view of what the BD Act intended to achieve in terms of ABS. What kind of considerations went into the formulations that exist in the Act? And now I want to have a look at, or I want you to look at where implementation has reached today. And the slide I have before you captures what has happened at the level of SBBs. So if we look at the national position of the cases which are expected to come to NBS, total applications that NBA has received till now, 4,907, out of which 2,142 have been approved, agreements signed, and rest of them are at various stages. Some of them have approximately, I think, 800 or so have been either withdrawn or they have been closed for some reason or the other. Now, out of these, if you look at it, 1662, the majority was for seeking IPRs. 293 are for research and commercialization of products. 27 for transfer of research results. 31 for third-party transfer, and 130 for transfer of biological resources for non-commercial research or research for emergency purpose. And this point also I forgot to mention earlier is to be noted that this kind of research gets some kind of relaxation from the ABS regimen. Now, another point which I want to now flag here is, it relates to the point I made earlier that the Country Act is important, but then the international enforcing it across the boundaries of the country was an issue which was settled through Nagoya Protocol in two ways. One was access were required to report such access through internationally recognized certificates of compliance to the CBD. And the second was that user countries are expected to create mechanisms to ensure that as users, such accessors comply with the terms and conditions of the provider countries. Now, India has already reported 1,360 IRCCs out of the total 2,200 global IRCCs reported. The total amount realized by NBA through these applications or through these grants so far is more than 100 crores. Now, this is an interesting issue. Again, I come back to it, that the issue now being flagged is that with such a small amount having accrued, is it worth it to continue with the ABS regime? As already pointed out by me, the tangible benefits in terms of monetary and non-monetary both have to be accounted for, number one. Number two, there is some amount of, or a very important amount of intangible benefit which is accruing on the ground, which probably people sitting in other areas can't even realize, and this intangible benefit accrues. Let me take the analogy.
Ma'am, you're not audible, please. Maybe you can try switching off your camera.
You can say do not feed.
Am I?
It's better now, ma'am.
Ma'am, you can
You can
switch
try
off your
speaking
camera.
once again, ma'am. We'll just connect in a second. There are some internet issues. Just in 2 more seconds, we'll connect.
Am I audible now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so the point I was making was, that hardly 2%, 3%, 5%, if I wanted to stretch, I would say 10% of the patents actually reach the market and produce remuneration for the patent holders. Now, should this make out a case of the other 90% not having the patents? I don't think that can be anybody's case. And therefore, I don't think merely because we don't see the realization in thousands of crores, it makes out a case that ABS has outlived its relevance or legitimacy, and therefore we should have a second look at it. What happened? Yeah. So this, with this, I come to the challenges that ABS faces today. And it is actually a challenge of credibility and challenge of existence. It is facing an existential challenge now. And the arguments placed by the opponents run somewhat like this. It restricts research and development. Now, as I have already said, this was never the idea. The entire system is to facilitate research. And facilitate research, visualizing certain terms and conditions which establish accountability and secure the principle of benefit sharing, through which they secure intergenerational equity and helps conservation. The problem probably might have been in the implementation, which I have reason to understand now has been addressed in quite a measure, but it's an ongoing process. It can continue, and sometimes the kind of arguments which are placed before us or advanced to question or to say that it restricts research and development are basically through a sense of perhaps perception that why seek prior intimation when research is already going in the normal course. Now, the basic principle is that the conservers and providers must understand what is happening to the resources, and therefore this regulation or facilitation through these terms and conditions is necessary, and I think the door would always remain open to improve whatever processes are in order to facilitate it further. The second issue, which is very hotly debated, is regarding the definition required to seek NBA prior approval. Now, while looking at this issue, there was, as I pointed out earlier, an extreme view that no foreigner should be allowed to access unless we sort of enter into agreement with them, or nobody should be allowed because the cases of Hari and so many other things were operating in the minds of people. The drafters at that time were faced with the questions as to whether to link it with the equity, rate of equity participation, or to some other criteria. And after consideration of the entire issue, it was realized that equity participation, rate of equity participation is actually governed by considerations of the government of attracting FDI and exercising control over sectors identified by the government and opening of those sectors, market shares. So the considerations were totally different, and the companies tend to change their nature also in order to sometimes fit into the national norms because of the market share, and there have been instances of such cases. So the challenge was somehow make sure that whenever any resource went abroad for, or any element covered under the Act went beyond the boundaries of the country, it went with the information of the country, with accountability to share benefits. And therefore, it was thought that the best formulation would be the entity or participation, foreign participation in management. Now the word here is management, not at any level. It is therefore an open-ended thing. The management means management, not if a who is probably from somewhere else and then it becomes eligible or subject to attract this provision. Is not the idea. So this was the consideration which went into it. And today also, if a proposal is made, which is often made, that link it to 51% equity participation, my submission to that is that that is a very sort of dynamic situation. The equity participation norms, rates, etc. keep changing, and perhaps that would not be a very reliable way of enforcing ABS. Another argument which is given is by the industry that we are already paying GST. Why this additional tax? This is nothing but an additional tax. Now, tax and the benefit, accrual of benefit and sharing of benefit, according to me, are two complete different platforms. What is a tax? Tax is a levy by the government on goods and services with a purpose. The purpose is for running the business of the government, which means development, maintenance of law and order, funding the government for whatever. What is the benefit? Benefit is in lieu of conservation, in lieu of creation, in lieu of access to resources. You cannot be. Let me take the example of mining sector. Now, in the mining sector, the mining industry pays the license fee for mining, pays the GST, but at the same time is charged with the responsibility of the rehabilitation of the mined area. Now, I think an argument can be raised there also. I've given GST, I've given license fee. Why should I be called upon rehabilitating the area? Rehabilitated through the funds I am already giving. The point I'm trying to make is that there are certain sectors, certain areas where the argument of GST or the cost, other costs do not actually compensate for the now another argument to challenge the act is that it is an impediment in the ease of doing business. Now, for that matter, everything becomes impediment. One can argue that even GST is an impediment in ease of doing business, because I have to submit quarterly statements or whatever statements, and I spend so much of time on creating those documents or for any other purpose. Having said that, I would certainly agree that in case processes and procedures create delays, create uncertainties, create unresponded questions, there is a case for improvement in that. That improvement is necessary, and I understand that NBA is taking note of all these difficulties from time to time, and especially now is on a course to change, even amend even laws and regulations in order to address this situation. Another argument which I've often read about is the argument that the biological resources are now becoming redundant in their current form, because technological advancement is such that you don't need biological resources to the extent like you used to use. And therefore, it is now obsolete of this concept of ABS. My submission to that is that the concept of ABS can never be obsolete, because as of now, the core comes from the resource, and then a synthesis takes place or technology takes place. Maybe we would reach a stage sometime when that may not be necessary. One doesn't know. Like it has happened that now those traditional cameras, one doesn't have to hang around one's neck, and one can just have that small telephone phone set and then click a picture anywhere. Where the technology takes us, we don't know what happens tomorrow. So as and when it happens, yes, then one can take a call on that. But today, when we look at the situation, I think if the principle of equity is to be enforced, if the conservation is to be secured, if the sustainable development is the goal, and the communities have to be encouraged to conserve, ABS is a necessity, and it should uh, it should continue, and wherever necessary, the changes in the system should be considered and brought about. Now, before I end, I want to share an experience of some friends of mine, which happened only about 2 weeks ago. These friends of mine, two children and a couple, my husband and wife, they went to visit a monument in Delhi, having been cooped. So when they reached the monument, they realized that now that physical ticket was not available, they had to buy the ticket on their system. So they stood there, the system demanded their Aadhaar card number, their name, their address, and 4 persons standing there trying to feed the information. It took nearly 20 minutes to get 4 tickets. Very restless. The son suggested, let us not waste time. It's not worth it. Let's go. But the daughter said, no, 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 having come this far, okay, let us somehow. And they went into the monument after 20 minutes, securing a ticket. The cost of ticket was just 20 rupees, and had a visit. And when they were going back, they were discussing amongst themselves that why should we have this kind of a system? When the daughter piped up, she said, see, it was not the system per se which was wrong. It was not the concept which was wrong. Actually, they need all this information. If we are going to visit these monuments, and tomorrow if there is some COVID patient there or some spread of COVID, they'll have to track us down. And it's not so functional and so efficient was the internet connection. So do you give up the system of ticket because the internet connection was not working as efficiently as probably it should? Or should you improve the internet connection? I think I leave this open issue, and therefore you have this child here who is saying, don't throw me out. Thank you.
Thank you, Amarjit ma'am, for very nicely bringing up the institutional history and what has happened so far. And I really like the way you posed the challenges that we are facing as NBA as we try and implement the act. And as you have yourself raised the point that is ABS a tax? And I'm sure you have provided an answer to that also, that it is not a tax in the way people conceive tax, but it is a way in which we are trying to recognize the conservers of the resource, providing some benefits for their activities, and also looking to it that while we commercially extract and use these resources, the conservation of these resources itself is not jeopardized. So those questions are there. And as you have said, and I would like to convey on behalf of NBA, that we are now in the process of further promoting the ease of doing business. And the biggest challenge or difficulties, if I can say so, was coming from the research community, who was very much up in arms saying that we need prior approval, prior approval from the NBA. We are now very actively considering that can we now change this provision from a prior approval to a prior intimation. And that will be a game changer to a large number of people in the scientific community who do their research on biological resource over there. So these and many are questions which are being considered, and I have been following the Q&A which is going on, and my colleagues are responding to that. But not everything can be responded through a Q&A like this. But if there are questions of serious concerns or immediate concerns, I would request all of you to kindly send this to NBA, and we should definitely be able to respond to them in the manner in which you get satisfied with the query. And I can assure you that we are now in the process of putting into provisions, amending the positions where required, either in the law or in the rules or in the ABS guidelines. You know that there are different procedures involved, but these things are now being actively considered. And the whole idea is that we should be able to effectively implement the National Biodiversity Act and the rules and the guidelines which are there. And at the same time, a lot of, as I said, if I call it a lack of understanding or misunderstanding or misinterpretation, all kinds of issues are there, from definitions to provisions. We are looking at it. And I'm very sure that we should be able to find a way. Not every query can be solved or resolved, but the larger interest is there that we exist for our stakeholders. Stakeholders also have to understand that not every request of theirs can be considered, because we do have to follow the due process of law, which we are consulting our experts, consulting a large number of, ever since I joined about 18 months back, a range of consultations have taken place, range of associations we have heard. We have tried to respond to them, and we would request that, and through all of you, we would, and that was the reason why in the last webinar today of this series, we still have the most important session or section on ABS. And we heard from Madam Amarjit that what is the viewpoint, what is the context. And I do agree that a lot of things have changed in the last 18 years, and we need to respond to it in a much better manner than what we have been doing. So I hand it back to Manisha. If there are quick questions, you can run through them, and my colleague Dr. Sandra Pandey can respond, or Ma'am Amarjit can also respond. So back to you, Manisha, for conducting. We can go for another 10-15 minutes with this Q&A.
Right, sir. So I think we have been responding live also on some of the questions, and there are some more questions I'd just like to read it. Madam Kiran Devi wants recordings of earlier talks. So definitely, I mean, this is all available on NBA's website, so you can go and visit and listen to all the earlier webinars in this regard. There's one question on what is the mode of ABS for commercial utilization. There's no name who has asked, but yeah. So the question is, what is the mode of ABS for commercial utilization? So you are muted, sir.
Manisha, thank you for that question. Can you check with this gentleman if he's live? Because the question itself is not very clear. You can provide him an opportunity to unmute and come in.
Right, right. So I think if you can please speak, the person who has asked what is the mode of ABS for commercial utilizations, while we move on to the next question, that is from Ms. Meenakshi,
Please.
and she is asking what is the data availability for computing SDG indicator 15.6.1, which is related to access and benefit sharing.
Well, that's a far-reaching question for this webinar. We need to answer it separately. I must say, and I'm sure you're aware that MOSPI or the Ministry of Planning and Implementation Statistics is seized with that, and they have created those indicators. They are collecting information. So that would be a better place for this question. And in that entire target and indicator, ABS is a small part only.
Thank you, sir. So we take the next question that is from Ms. Angarika Datta. She is asking, what are the administrative challenges in the disbursal of the revenue accrued from ABS to the beneficiaries? So you
Question.
might have, yeah.
Several challenges are there. Yeah, several challenges are there. See, first of all, to collect ABS itself is an issue, but our issue, I won't say the problem, our issue also starts the moment we collect this money in NBA. Because this money is not for NBA, there is only 5% of this collection is what NBA can retain for its administrative charges. The rest of it has to go back to SBB, which also can retain only a part of it, but eventually every money goes back to BMC. So see, now as we try to improve our processes, as we try to activate our BMCs, as we try to improve the quality of our PBRs, these are all linked action, because we must know that who are the people or which is the community or which is the BMC which is involved in this particular ABS process. And if we know it, the money has to flow back to it. And I am very pleased to say that as I speak today, there is not a single penny of any ABS money which has been retained now with the NBA. We have ensured that all these money or sums of money which were there has gone back more than, as Ma'am Amarjeet also showed in her slide, we are talking of about 115 crores rupees have gone back, and the larger share coming up from red centers. But that is what our endeavor is, that we should be able to quickly get back the money. In Telangana, very recently, we provided money to 17 BMCs, and state by state, we are going. In the last 6 to 9 months, more than 20 states who had their ABS share with deposited with the NBA, we have gone to give them back, and we are following it up that from them it should go back to the BMCs and to the person concerned. So back to you, Manisha.
Right. So we have another question from Ms. Abhilasha P. Tripathi. She is asking, when can we expect the revised ABS guidelines to be in place?
Well, let me tell you that there are 3 things involved: ABS guidelines, then BD rules, and then the BD Act. For the ABS guidelines and the BD rules, the approving authority is the Honorable Minister of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. As per our parliamentary procedures, no parliamentary approval is required for amending or modifying or notifying the ABS guidelines and the rules. It should happen fairly quickly. But as far as the Act is concerned, the Act has to go through the parliamentary process, and it is anybody's guess that what kind of time frame it can take place. But surely the ABS guidelines and the BD rules, which are within the power of the ministry and the minister, will or should happen fairly quickly. Maybe 3 months, or maybe between 3 to 6 months is the time.
Thank you, sir. So we move on to next question. That is from Somana Datta. And the question is, if we do any startup and use plant resources, do we have to apply for ABS?
Sorry, say it again.
So the question is, if we do any startup and use plant resources, do we
Yes.
have to apply for ABS?
See, the rules are very clear. If you are set up as a purely Indian company under Section 7, that is not required. But if you have are set up as a 3-2 company where there is some foreign participation in terms of equity or management, then a prior approval would be required.
Thank you, sir. Another question is from Ms. Geetanjali Vashisht. She is asking, are there any examples for penalties imposed to corporate bodies who contravenes any terms and conditions signed under agreement?
Well, there are 1 or 2 cases only of those nature, which we are following up. No conviction as yet, but definitely we are trying to improve the compliance in all possible manner. So if there are deviations or if there were in the past, we are following them up now.
Okay, so I don't see many questions, no new questions right now.
So we may give
yeah,
an opportunity back to Madam Amarjeet if she wants to come in and add on to what we have already said. And please, one more time, if you would like to come in.
There's one last question, sir. One last question. The question is from Ms. Astha Chandra. She is asking that regarding a possible certification scheme, is it possible to develop a national certification scheme to incentivize more corporate involvement in the whole ABS process?
Wow, this question is a music to our ears, both your and Manisha mine.
Right.
Because see, this question which indirectly Madam Amarjeet raised, that is ABS a tax, or can, if I can rephrase it, can ABS be converted into an incentive? And this is exactly we are now working on. We have engaged the best of minds over here. It will take a little while, but our intent is very clear. We want to change the narrative on the ABS. Instead of being looked upon as a tax or a burden, can we incentivize it? Can we ask our corporates to come and be part of that? Obviously, the certification will be voluntary, but we are looking at all these aspects. We do have, if I can disclose a little more, that some kind of a logo can be granted which says that this company is ABS compliant. And when you export this to the European market or the North American market, you know what these certifications can help. So we do have a system, as you know, of green buildings. So if there are buildings which have used or which are green in nature in terms of their energy, in terms of their waste, then we also understand that there is a green certification. On similar lines, we are looking at it that over and above the compliance of law, how we can make this process more incentivized. So you would be hearing, we would be organizing some more consultations and in this direction. And Manisha, if you want to add a line or two, please come in.
Sir, so yeah, I mean, I think something will be soon in place, and we will come along with NBA. Will be coming up very soon with a voluntary certification scheme to incentivize businesses, in complying to the ABS regulation in the country. So something very soon is coming up. So with this, maybe, sir, with your permission, may we close the question answer and then come back to Madam Amarjeet Ahuja to give her thoughts or inputs further.
Final remarks. Yes, that would be nice. So, ma'am, please come in one more time.
Okay. Thank you. I just have 1 or 2 comments. And one is that, yes, the point you made of identification as ABS compliant mark, which actually has some market value, Uh, and I think some work on this is already happening in European countries, and perhaps companies are now understanding the significance and importance of showing ABS compliance status, because it is something to be actually proud of in the context of conservation and sustainable development, number one. Number two, I think if I remember correctly, there was a demand from the industry and a need felt also, and it was recognized also. Probably a lot of work has already happened on that, and that related to sector specific standard operating procedures and guidelines, because different sectors of industry lend themselves to different treatment. And that is something which has to be reckoned with while dealing with their interactions with NBA, even SPBs, and processing their applications. So that is an area which needs help. And I think that would give a lot of confidence to industry and make things very transparent and easy to handle. And my last comment is that at the end of the day, we have to keep this in mind, that there are people who are sitting at far away places. They are conserving this biodiversity while we are reaping the harvest of that. And therefore, it is necessary that we recognize them, we remunerate them, and not only resources, but also the knowledge associated with that. We want intellectual property right protection for geographical, as geographical indication or trade mark, or IPR for what we create, but then what they have created, I think it has significance, it has importance, it has to be recognized when it is used in products, and they have to be given their due in creation of that nucleus which feeds into the modern industry. So in sum, ABS is something which is ethically, logically, and even on all other considerations is something which has to be there, which must be there. And therefore, our quest should continuously be to make it easy to understand and easy to implement. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you
ma'am.
so much,
Manisha,
ma'am.
back to you. We can
Sir,
close the session.
thank you so much. Thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing such a rich experience in an area which has not been fully understood by different stakeholders. But it is very important area, to understand and to get clarity on for sustainable management of biological resources. So with this, again, we would like to thank you very much for taking out time and share your experience in this area. And since this is last in the series of webinars that we had, I would like to now request Chairman Dr. V.B. Mathur to please come in to give his final and closing remarks. Over to you, sir.
Oh, well, I was not expecting it, but I am so pleased to note that there are around 100 people who are listening to this discourse, which shows that the interest has not waned. It has been something of the same kind since we started till this date today. We need to take a call that do we need to have another series launched up because the capacity gaps still remain. We want to reach out to as many people as we can. And through these 100 people, I would like to say that every single recording is available now on the NBA website forever. So people can look, and especially those who are from the university system can always take benefit of these things. These are very well a self-contained webinar series on all aspects of the Biodiversity Act. And we will be taking a call shortly that if we need to launch it, the webinar series in some other manner, because having dealt with capacity building, I know it is a continuous process. When I was discussing with Madam Amarjeet, when she said that, these slides people would have seen. Yes, I do agree that for some it would be, but every time we get some new audience. So I would like to assure you, and if people give us a feedback, we will definitely try to do another series, because it is one of the most cost-effective manner in which we can reach out. While COVID has been bad for all the reasons, I would say that NBA and Ministry and UNDP have worked together to put in this webinar series. And I would like to acknowledge the very nice support that we have received from UNDP in putting it together, and all the backup team at NBA, which has been instrumental in ensuring that without any glitch or without any major glitch, we can reach out. These are available. We will do some of the questions which we have not answered, or if you feel that which needs further elaboration, we will do that. So on behalf of NBA and my own behalf, I would like to thank you all for participating in this wonderful series. Okay, so we can close
you,
now,
sir.
Manisha.
Thank you, sir. So we officially close now. And as sir said, that you can always come back to us in writing. You can email it to us, whatever clarity further you seek on any of the topics that has been covered in the webinar series so far. So thank you so much once again for participating. Have a very nice day to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Manisha.